Ms. Fletcher, who represents Houston, who's not a member of the subcommittee, but she waved on and changed all of her travel plans just to be here to hear the distinguished representatives. Ms. Fletcher, you're recognized for your 5 minutes of questioning.
Well, thank you so much, Mr. Chairman, for allowing me to participate in today's hearing, to join you for the hearing. And I really want to thank our witnesses for being here, both those who are here in person and those who are joining us virtually. I have limited time with 5 minutes, but I do want to respond to a few issues that we've heard today and also give you all a chance to respond. There were several questions that I think the witnesses were not able to answer fully, but I also want to address why we are here and why this matters. You know, these bills are being written in Texas, but these bills are being written across the country. And this is a national issue. And what's happening in Texas is really a cautionary tale. I want to follow up on something that my colleague, Mr. Fallon, said. He raised the issue and said that it was horrifying to him and heartbreaking to hear about the past. Our witnesses here are talking about the past, but they're talking about the present. They are talking about what's being done to suppress the vote in Texas today. It is still happening, and it may not be, as our beloved late colleague John Lewis told us, requiring people to count the number of jelly beans in the jar, but our witnesses are telling us what's happening right now, and we need to listen to them, and we need to understand how we respond to this at a federal level. I have a couple of quick follow-up questions. Ms. Thompson, Representative Mace asked you several questions about what you need in Texas an ID for, and she asked a litany of questions. But there was one question she didn't ask, which was, does Texas require you to have an ID to vote? And I believe the answer is yes. In Texas, we have voter ID, and this bill is not about voter ID. It's a distraction from the issues and the methods that are in front of us. Is that right?
Yes.
And you also talked a little bit about the poll watchers. And I would like to know, I understand in this last legislative session that Texas passed what's called constitutional carry. Can those poll watchers carry weapons into the polling places under this legislation?
We're not sure yet, but I'm not sure. I don't think so, but I'm not sure.
Okay. Another question I had in a follow-up, and this is directed at Ms. Perales. Mr. Roy asked a question about Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act. And is it fair to say that the Voting Rights Act has, in fact, been watered down over the years and that we need to protect the rights of voters under Section 5 as well as Section 2?
Yes, it is absolutely true to say that. And he was inaccurate in saying Section 5 was struck down. It was not. It was the coverage formula in Section 4. Nevertheless, Texas voters and many others throughout the South have lost an important guarantee of their voting rights, and it needs to be restored as soon as possible.
Thank you very much, Ms. Perales. Another thing that we heard several of our colleagues talking about today is, in fact, some of the very innovative things that happened in Houston and Harris County, which I have the privilege of representing here in the Congress, and some of the extraordinary steps that our officials there took to make sure that people could safely exercise their right to vote during the pandemic. So some of the things that have been framed as issues of convenience really are issues of access. And from my experience, people across my district voted using these methods for a variety of reasons, and it was all voters who took advantage of these methods. And our elections administrator testified before the Texas legislature in the spring about some additional bills, not this current version of the bill, but a prior iteration, and really explained that some of the critical pieces that are challenging here is forbidding elections offices from telling people about mail-in ballots, about educating voters about their options to access the ballot box. It's a real micromanagement of local entities that's kind of contrary to what Texas Republicans have traditionally identified as a value of theirs. But it also does something, and we heard this from our colleagues today, that you're just kind of requiring some of the same things for people. But I would love to hear from you all how some of these things, and I think that's been the point of this hearing, that may seem facially neutral, are in fact discriminatory and will have a disproportionate impact on people in the communities that we all represent. And so I want to turn back because I think that Ms. Collier and I believe also Ms. Prowse were both not able to answer 2 questions. So I want to give you the time I have remaining to clear up anything that was asked and you didn't get a chance to completely answer.
Okay, the gentlelady yields back, and you will each be given a quick sec to respond.
Thank you so much. So just going through the part about the ballots being rejected, there is a provision on page 24 where the ballots will be rejected, and then about the partisan poll watchers. Again, there's no parity in criminal penalties. They can get away with, violating the law. And then there was a question about, can someone file a complaint? I can, but the harm has already been completed. So I've already been deterred and disenfranchised by the time I can file a complaint. So I really have a whole bunch of measures in here that need to be addressed that they now recognize. And so this is very further evidence that they have not really fully vetted the provisions of this bill.
Okay.
I would simply add in 1 minute, less than 1 minute, to Representative Donalds, the section that you're looking for in the bill that you're reading is section 5.10, in which the number provided by the male voter has to match the number on file with the registrar. And then the last thing I'd like to mention, just to emphasize, this bill has nothing to do with voter ID at the polls. However, since Representative Fallon stressed so much that he wanted things to be truthful, I need to correct him. He said there was no voter ID in 2008. There was. He said that the 2011 voter ID bill did not depress turnout. It must be pointed out the 2011 voter ID bill was struck down as racially discriminatory by a federal court and was not used in the 2020 election. So even though this bill is not about voter ID, it's important for us to remember that the voter ID law passed by Texas within the past decade was racially discriminatory.
Okay, thank you very much. Is